Welcome to CSGuitars, the science of loud. This is an appendix video relating to the small upgrades for a Stratocaster video that I put out earlier this week. And I wanted to talk about a few things that got brought up there in the comments, particularly about modifications to a Stratocaster. There were a great many of you chipped into the comments with suggestions that you have done to modify your Stratocasters or other ideas that you've seen that you like the idea of being implemented. Everything from locking tuners to different pickup sets to different ways to wire the tone controls and the electronics. And I think that's fantastic testament to this instrument and how it was initially conceived. The original idea from Leo Fender was to have a modular instrument where all the parts could be traded in and out if and when the player desired. You know, if you wore out the frets, there was no point in getting a fret job. Just, replace the entire neck. The idea was a modular guitar that would stay with you and you could change up as you needed. And to see so many people doing that to the Stratocaster is really just going back to the initial design of the instrument and shows just how personal an instrument the Stratocaster can be. I think we see this more with the Strat than we do with any other guitar. People want to change and want to modify the Strat to have for it to suit their own playing style, their own genre. So we see a lot of changes to pickups, a lot of changes to electronics and wiring to make things very specific, and it makes it no two Stratocasters are the same. Everyone's Stratocaster is unique to them, and I think that's purely a wonderful thing. So seeing everybody really engage with the idea of modifying a Strat, I think is fantastic. But this does bring me onto my own ideology on how to modify guitars, as there was a few suggestions from people saying, why didn't you do certain things? Why didn't you change the locking tuners, especially if you were concerned about tuning stability? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? So I think to address my own ideology is that for modification of instruments, it should be what should you change, not what can you change. To quote Ian Malcolm, your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they never stopped to think if they should. So modifications for me are things that should be changed, not can be changed. Now, while I did have some concerns about the tuning stability of this instrument, it was only for the upper two strings, and I attributed that to the original string tree, which was so low to the headstock here that it was putting a lot of down pressure on the strings, and I reckon that was probably either snagging the strings in the nut or at the tree itself, and that was what was causing those tuning instabilities. So I chose to swap out the string tree for a taller Graphtec one, and once I'd done that, all the tuning stability issues went away. Everything's totally rock solid about this guitar. So I isolated what I thought was the problem, I changed what I thought would fix it, and it did. At this stage, I've changed everything that should be changed. Just because I can put locking tuners on it at this point doesn't give me any benefit. Just because I can change out the nut at this point doesn't give me any benefit. Those things don't need to be changed, so they really shouldn't. If the tuning stability on this instrument is totally fine now and not a problem, then I just don't see the necessity to spend money on locking tuners or a different nut. The nut on this one is synthetic bone, it's cut properly, the strings move through it effectively, it's not an issue. The tuners on this are high quality Fender tuners. They're just the modern style. They're holding the strings where they should do. As long as they're wrapped properly, there's not a problem. So there's no need to upgrade this any further. It would just be upgrading for the sake of upgrading at that point, and I don't see any real need to do so. And were I to upgrade the tuners on this, I think instead of going for locking tuners, I'd go for the split post, string down the middle, vintage style ones, because they are effectively as good as locking tuners. As soon as you put the string down the hole and bent it at a tight right angle and then wrapped it round, you can get only one or two wraps on there. You don't need any more than that, and it's completely tuning stable. But for me, I think the split post design is certainly the best tuner, especially for a Strat. So if I were to upgrade the tuners, which I don't feel is necessary, then it would be to go to a more vintage style, to get a more vintage aesthetic, because I like the look of those tuners and their performance. I think they work just as well as a locking tuner, and it would fit with the sort of mix of modern and vintage features of this instrument. So that's where I would go with tuners rather than locking. One thing I probably will go back and do as a further modification to this instrument is to shield the inner cavities better here. Go into each individual pickup cavity and the control cavity and the back of the scratch plate and get some proper copper foil on there and really go to town ensuring that I've got a complete Faraday cage blocking out any outside radio frequency interference, because that is a real issue with single coil pickups, and it's something that I'm noticing sitting in the studio. Which brings me neatly onto the concept of noise and noise in your signal, and I think there's a good bit of misunderstanding about where noise comes from and how you tackle it. So I think this is a great example of how to discuss this here. Now, single coil pickups, true single coil pickups work as antennae. They pick up outside radio frequency radiation. That's just the nature of these things. An antennae for picking up your television or radio signals is simply a coil of wire. A coil of wire will pick up radiation of radio frequency. That's how they work. A single coil pickup is just a coil of wire, so by nature they're going to pick up radio frequency interference, and a lot of what you hear as hum and buzz in a signal is due to outside sources, not internal to your rig. Now, it's easy with this guitar to demonstrate that the hum that you get with single coil pickups mostly comes from outside interference sources and not anything internal to your signal chain, because I've made this middle pickup reverse wound, reverse polarity. Each of these single coil pickups will pick up the same RF sources. Anything that's in my environment that is chucking out radiation will be picked up by all three of these pickups the same. But the magic is that the middle pickup picks up that noise 180 degrees out of phase, which means that when I combine this pickup with either the bridge or the neck, the phases of the two noises cancel out, and it eliminates anything that's an outside source, and the only noise you will hear then is anything internal to the system. So I've got the Stratocaster set to the middle pickup, the amplifier set to clean, and there is a compressor on the floor. Part of a compressor's job is to make quiet sounds louder, so any hum that's being picked up by the pickups will get lifted a little bit by the compressor to make it a bit more obvious. There's a bit of a misconception with compressors that they are noisy, that it's the compressor that adds noise to the system. It's not, it's just that when you switch on your compressor, it's amplifying any other low-level noise that was already there. So the compressor isn't to blame, it's a misconception, but that's an aside. We'll talk about that some other day. So I've got the middle position here. If I roll up the volume, you should be able to hear there's a low amount of hum in the amplifier now, and that's coming from outside RF sources, not from the system itself. If I put it onto the distortion channel right now, you'll notice that all that hum gets a lot louder. The reason for that is distortion is just a lot of amplification, so any low-level stuff again gets amplified and distorted, and you can hear it a lot more. So that's all noise, and it's outside noise, and I think I can demonstrate this pretty effectively if I switch the pickup selector switch to select both the neck and middle so that we get that hum cancelling operation. Now, there's still a tiny, tiny little buzz that you can hear, and that is system noise. That's the buzz that's coming from the amplifier and the pedals and the pickups and all the rest of that. But the main buzz, if we go back to the middle position on its own, is something from outside. It's something that the pickups are picking up that can be cancelled out. It's also easy to demonstrate that this is some outside source, something in the environment that's causing this, because if I turn up the volume and then start moving the guitar around, you'll hear the hum sort of come and go depending on which way the guitar is pointing. Listen to this. So you notice as I get the guitar to this position, the hum's basically non-existent. We turn it this way, or turn it that way, and we get the hum coming back in again. So depending on where the pickups are pointing, we're getting different amounts of this interference. Now you'll be asking, Colin, if it comes from outside sources, if all this noise is coming from outside sources, what's causing it? Well, in my case, it's very easy to explain. I have two giant softbox studio lights switched on and turned towards me right now for filming purposes, and they are chucking out a lot of electromagnetic radiation. Obviously, they're lights. The electromagnetic spectrum is essentially a spectrum of radiation, the same radiation all at different frequencies. There's certain frequencies of the electromagnetic spectrum that we would refer to as light, and then at longer wavelengths we start calling it radio waves. We call these different things different names depending on what the application we're using them for, but essentially they're all part of the same radiation. You know, microwaves, radio waves, light, visible light, gamma rays, X-rays, they're all part of the same radiation. So if I've got big lights here chucking out visible radiation, they're likely also chucking out wavelengths of much longer radiation in the radio frequency range, which the pickups can pick up. So to demonstrate how much of an impact these big lights have, I'm going to turn the guitar on, get that buzz, and then I'm going to switch the lights off, and you'll see just how drastic a reduction in that buzz we get when the lights go off. Give me a second here. So now with those lights off, you can hear that the buzz has drastically reduced. There's still some buzz there because there's other items in my vicinity giving off interference. I've got a computer and a TV screen, there's other lamps and lights still on and other electricity surging about, but the big studio lights make a big difference. Let me turn them back on again. You should be able to hear a significant increase in that hum. So I could combat this using a noise gate. I've put a noise gate ahead of my compressor in the chain now. It's switched on at the minute, and as you can hear, sounds pretty low, but as soon as I switch it off, all that buzz comes back. So by realizing where the noise is coming from, you can effectively deal with it. What I've done is ensured that before the buzz hits any of the rest of the signal, I'm filtering it out with the noise gate. Of course, the issue with a noise gate is that it doesn't eradicate hum entirely. All it does is block sounds under a certain threshold. So if I play the guitar right now, as I hold the note, the buzz comes back in until the note fades out. And that's when the level goes below the threshold and the gate can kick in again. So don't think that a gate will get rid of the noise, it's only clamping it off when the signal's too quiet. For me to solve this problem I have with my studio lights, I need to shield the guitar a lot better, make sure that everything is in a complete Faraday cage so that outside RF interference can't penetrate into the electronics, or at least it has a little bit more difficulty doing so. That way I could prevent any of this noise getting into the signal in the first place, and that would drastically reduce the amount of hum that I have when using this guitar through any distortion. Some people might say, well, Colin, why don't you just have noiseless pickups in here? Well, noiseless typically means either humbucker or dummy coil, and I'm not particularly interested in either of those options. I'm wanting a true single coil sound, hence why I've gone for the setup I have. The reverse wound, reverse polarity pickup allows me to get two noiseless positions while still retaining pure single coil operation. So that's what I've opted for, as like a halfway house. But I don't want to go for these noiseless pickup options because they do change the tonality somewhat. They're great under certain applications. They certainly would solve this issue, but I think there's other ways around it that I can implement that don't involve me going for noiseless pickups. I hope this has been a little bit useful in learning about hum and where it comes from and how you can tackle it, and understanding that it's not necessarily noise in your system, it's quite often noise from somewhere else that your system is picking up, and you've got to go through the thought process of where's the noise coming from and how do I tackle it. Throwing a noise gate on isn't generally the solution. That should just be to tidy up any noise between your playing. It doesn't fix the problem of hum. But that's all for now. Keep it loud, and I'll see you later.